Good morning, everybody. I see we have a small, neat group of interesting people today. I'm looking at the names on the screen, and we have an engineering manager, a sugar and industrial division manager, an office administrator, an HR manager, an operations manager, an HR business partner, a learning and development facilitator, and a patient administration manager. Very interesting. And from interesting industries, consulting, defense, human resources, remuneration consulting, health services, healthcare, and hospital care. So that's quite a diverse audience. Also, in terms of company sizes, everything from small companies between 1 and 50 employees and companies with over 1,000 staff. So a very interesting, diverse group this morning. I will look forward to this being a more personal session. Generally speaking, we have anything up to 50 or 60 people in a session. Today is a much smaller group. And so therefore, it can be much more personal and directly related to your requirements. So I'm going to go through the content as soon as I can, because it's the discussion afterwards which I think adds the value. So this is a case study from one of our clients, and obviously we've sterilized the data for purposes of privacy and POPI and so on. But I found it an interesting team to work with because these three people are in similar jobs. They're administrators inside a company, and but the results of the talent mapping process created three completely different plans, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. How we use talent mapping to help clients to make good decisions for their staff members, but also for the business, so that both sides win from the equation. So thank you for joining me. Let's get into the detail. So first of all, my name is Steve Rogers. Yes, it's true. I am Captain America. It's the guy overseas is not the right one. I am the original Captain America. I've been running this business now for the last 18 years, and I've been consulting in and around the human resources space for about 27 years in total. So I've met a few people, looked at a few CVs, and read a few job descriptions. And one of the things that I think is missing in the HR space is a greater focus on data, using data to make useful decisions. And hopefully I'll persuade you in the same way today by showing you what we do with our clients. All right. So we've also had the privilege of working in various countries and with many different kinds of companies. I did a workshop in Montreal in Canada a few years ago, and the Americans in the group asked me what my sector was, what my niche is. Some of them say niche. And I said, well, we work with companies that employ people. And they found that a strange definition, because in America, obviously, it's a huge country with millions of people. And so people do tend to niche in that country. But in South Africa and in Africa and other countries, it's easy to work with a wide variety of companies. We've also worked remotely and face-to-face across Africa, one company in Australia, and in Hong Kong, China, Israel, and the United Kingdom. So 5 ways, just a quick advertorial if you don't mind for a couple of seconds. 5 ways we help you to make the right people decisions. Number 1, we help our clients to put the right employees in the right job. In other words, we look at the staff of a company. Number 2, we help sales teams to find the right people and to make sure that they benchmark their best people and hire according to those people. Number 3, we look at teams. Those are management teams, leadership teams, teams of salespeople, accountants, bookkeepers, IT people, and we ask the question, how do we turn those individual strengths into an exceptional team? Number 4, we help with succession planning, right people, right future. So how do we know who to develop in which way for the future of an organization's resources? And finally, we help our clients to recruit the right candidates for the right job by working with more evidence and with less guesswork. Cool. Let's get to the case study content. As we go along, please feel free to raise your hands with questions, or if you want to, you can wait until the end and we can discuss a few things. So, as I said, this is a small admin support team, 3 people in the particular team with 1 manager, and it's part of an annual talent mapping exercise that we do. So the central question was, how should the manager with HR support develop three people in similar roles when their potential contribution and development needs are so different? So the first clue to this is that just because you're in the same job as a colleague doesn't mean that you need the same development, obviously. So talent mapping is a process that combines evidence and management judgment to support better people decision. What kind of evidence? Very straightforwardly, most companies will have some form of a job spec, a role requirement. They'll know something about the performance of the staff member. They'll know about the track record of the individual based on the CV and on their performance and their history with the company. They should have assessments that deal with things like behavior, habits, potential, intelligence, and so on. And obviously, there's no shortage of tools in the world. There are hundreds of different tools. The question is, how do you use those tools? How do you deploy those tools in the most effective fashion? The second part of it is the management context. So we work best with our clients when we combine our knowledge of the tools with the manager's lived experience of the environment. We can never be experts in your industries. We can never be experts in your companies because you have the lived experience, we don't. However, a combination of our experience with a broad range of managers and industries, combined with your context, your observations, your lived experience and competency, that tends to be a happy marriage. So talent mapping is not about putting people into boxes. I've watched over the years how people get put into 9-box talent grids for succession planning purposes. And those assessments, unfortunately, rely on the manager's opinion. And the manager's opinion is biased by their personal experience. So I prefer to rather say, what is the evidence to suggest that a person belongs in a particular position in the company? It's also not a promotion list. A lot of companies will look at their staff and say, who has the potential to be developed and promoted? And to my mind, that's the wrong question, because not everybody should be promoted for their own good as well as the good of the company. And secondly, some people don't actually, they're not the right kind of people to be rising into management. There are a lot of people in the world who are fantastic in support and specialist roles, but less effective in management and leadership. And those are the four broad types of career paths in companies. There shouldn't be one common assessment result either. So we don't simply say, right, you're in this job, therefore you are this. The idea should rather be, we've assessed you using a different bunch of tools, and we think that there's an option for you to grow into another role or to change your function, possibly be redeployed. And in exceptional circumstances, we might even recommend that you leave the company to either join a company more suited to your talent, or because you need to develop outside of the company because you've been in this company for too long. So we have those discussions, and sometimes that can be interesting because people are surprised to have a transparent discussion about development. And then most importantly, it's not a replacement for the manager's judgment, and it's not a once-off HR exercise. This is an ongoing process. So what we do with our clients is we meet each manager with their staff once a year. And then in between those meetings, the managers talk to us about particular recruitments, promotions, succession planning problems, or there might be fresh conflict, there might be a fresh performance problem, or something's gone off the rails. And so then there's a need for a short 10, 20-minute discussion to identify what's going on. So what we bring to the table is our experience in this business, and what the manager brings to the table is their context and their lived experience of the situation. Cool. So what managers need to know from our perspective is to be able to distinguish between who can be challenged and stretched and not, who doesn't need that, who needs structure and support, who needs to stay where they are, which people in the company actually, if we try and promote them or develop them, we actually mess with them. There are many, many people who are very comfortable. They love the company, they love their jobs, and they don't want to move or be promoted. They're quite comfortable with themselves in their own skins. Who may have future potential? Obviously, the opposite of staying in your current role is who has the potential to rise. Now, there's three kinds of rise. There's rising from a support role to a specialist role, rising from specialist to management, or rising from any role to leadership. And then who may not want a promotion, which is the one we spoke about a few seconds ago. So getting back to our team, when we assessed the team, we noticed that the team was generally similar in their behavioral outlook. So they were dependable people, they were service-oriented, they were detail-focused, they care about the rules and regulations, they pay attention to quality and detail, they don't like breaking the rules. They prefer to work in a structured fashion, and they are conscious of quality. The worst thing I can say to these people is, you've made a huge mistake, you've cost the company money, because that is taken very personally by these people. So that's the first clue in the process. How do we know this? Did we talk to them? Did we talk to the manager? No. Before we start the sessions in talent mapping, we assess these people using psychometric and non-psychometric tools. So we work on a program with our clients to build this data over 12 months. And depending on the size of the client, obviously with a much bigger client, you would work in divisions or departments. In a small company, you might finish the entire exercise in a few weeks. So that's the first step, is to understand that these people are well designed and well suited to an administration job. The first person, let's talk about the first individual. So this individual, obviously Sabelo is my made-up name for him. Sabelo is young. He's about 20 years old. He is inquisitive. How do I know that? Because of the assessment results. When it came to one particular assessment, we look at their approach to problem solving. And he scored 80% for the problem solving section. So he's got a bent towards that. A lot of young people haven't developed that creativity yet. And so seeing it in a 20-year-old is really nice to see. Secondly, technically capable. He's already on his way to a BCom. So he's studying part-time, which is a tough challenge for most people. And he can deal comfortably with difficult problems. He's suited, in my mind, to deeper specialist work. How do I know that? Because we measured his behavioral preferences. And his behavioral preferences suggested that he's a reasonably assertive individual, but his assertiveness is based upon his knowledge and his understanding of process and a preference to work independently. This is not a people manager. This is a technical individual. So his strong future potential is unlikely to come from things like service and sales. He's much more likely to be a good technical manager, and that could be in a technical role such as operations manager or factory manager, but it could also be finance, it could be legal, it could be accountancy. They're different kinds of roles that are technical in their nature. Now, the risk with Sabelo is that he may leave the company quite quickly because he's impatient and he can get bored quite quickly. He has a scattered focus. How do we know that? Again, in the assessments that we used, we noticed that when it came to answering the questions, he was all over the place. He went backwards and forwards in the questions. He took time. There were some questions which should have been completed in about 10 or 20 seconds. In some of those questions, he spent 2 or 3 minutes answering the question. So that means he was either answering his cell phone, looking at his website, or chatting to a friend. So we're looking for distraction in the way people complete their work. And then the other part of it is that he's already, even at the age of 20, beginning to coach other staff members of a similar age in his team. Now, what we have to be careful of with Sabelo is that he doesn't become overconfident. He doesn't get cocky that because he's capable, he thinks he can do it all by himself at the moment. So keeping him grounded and challenging him will be important. All right, so that's the beginning of it. So what do we do with our friend Sabelo? Our job is to stretch and retain. The company is keen to keep him because they want young, talented staff members to grow in the business. So I suggested to the manager that we provide Sabelo with selected stretch assignments. Get him into his discomfort zone. Give him extra projects that normally wouldn't be given to this kind of staff member, but give them to him on the basis that if he fails, that's okay, he's learning. But if he succeeds, that's good news. That means he's growing, his capacity and his performance are growing. Deepen his product and technical knowledge. Keep on teaching him the products of the company and keep him going. For example, at the moment he's busy with the CFP. So not CFP, sorry, a BCom. That's somebody else I'm thinking of, CFP. Keep him busy with his BCom. Make sure that he does it in 3 years or 4 years, not 5 years or 6 years. And so keep him on track. Now, it's often hard for a young person at the age of 20 to understand why it's useful to grow yourself early when you're in your 20s. Often young people are chasing the jewels, chasing next Saturday night, chasing the fun of being young, which is completely understandable. But if you can spend a chunk of your time working on the development of yourself, that is useful. That is a useful thing to do. So it means that if Sabelo is smart, he will, by the age of 30, be in a middle management position, possibly managing a technical department or a technical function. And that means that his career is fast tracking, and we've got him, if not working in our company, working somewhere else. And if this manager does a good job, this manager will get a phone call from Sabelo at the age of 35, his age 35, saying to the manager, "Thank you so much. Without your guidance, when I was 20 to 25, I would never have made the leaps that I made." And that's obviously one of the pleasures we get in human resources and in training and development, to help talented people grow and develop in their jobs. The last point here is to avoid promoting him too quickly. Sometimes it happens in sport and it happens in business where people are seen as super talented, we promote them, and then suddenly the wheels come off because the next level up is too complex for that person. All right, so that's the first part of it. And this was a very good discussion. I love meeting young, talented people because if they're smart and they listen, which is not often the case, but if they listen and they're smart, they will get down to the work they need to do, and they will accelerate their careers. If you, as some of the people online now today, if you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, you will know what it's like to be developed when you're young and to have developed somebody and to have helped them to accelerate their careers. We try to do this with as much evidence as we can and the context of the manager. It was quite interesting, actually. One aside in this case study was that this individual, the manager said to me that he's already acting as a mentor to another staff member in the team. So it's quite interesting that people, they see what we're talking about in the assessments. All right, then second example. So Chantal is also in this admin position. She's a friendly and cooperative person. So you see the switch from the last person. We said he was more technically task-oriented. This individual, Chantal, is more friendly and cooperative. So she's a more service-based individual, suited to customer support potentially, less confident with unfamiliar problems. So one of the assessments we do is that problem-solving assessment, and we noticed that her performance fell off on that assessment. And again, she had a problem with time management, and she was less confident about completing the assessment accurately. So again, that's something that can be developed and improved over time, but she needs to spend some time developing it, because what we call the idea habits are the habits that simplify and solve problems, that help you to use your change, your openness to change, your openness to innovation in order to solve problems. So for example, if I'm making a fire, this is a simple example I often use. If someone says to me, "Steve, please make a fire," that term is open to interpretation, right? Because I might go outside and burn the house down, or I might go outside and make a tiny little fire. So what I should do when I first start to solve a problem like making a fire is I need to confirm the context. So I must simplify the problem. So if someone says to me, Steve, make a fire, I must say, what for? And if the objective is to braai some meat, I must answer the question in the context by saying, how much meat? So if we're going to have a small braai for 2 people, then that's a small fire. If we're going to have 50 people arriving over 4 hours, then I need to build a fire that's got coals on the one side burning and coals ready to be used to use on the braai. So there's things I need to simplify. Now, that's the first step. The second step is I get outside to start making the fire and I discover that the wood is wet. Or I discover that the braai is dirty, or I discover the braai is broken. There's a number of possibilities. So now I might need to use my openness to change to say, okay, I don't want to use wood anymore. What else can I use? Or do I need to make a new plan? So that's about openness to change in the way I do things. Or do I just say, you know what, I can't make a fire? And some people will just give up. They'll look at the context and say, sorry, I can't do this. So they refuse to be open to change or to use their ability to innovate. And we measure that. We measure an individual's ability to do that. And then the final step is to actually solve the problem. So do I finally build the fire and braai the meat? And if I successfully build the fire and braai the meat, then I've solved the problem and I score points for doing that. So we measure all of that because it's interesting to see how do people solve problems. In Chantal's case, she struggled to do it and she struggled to do it timeously and accurately. And that's important because that can be improved if she's prepared to concertedly develop herself and take charge of her career. She's also young. She's 19 years old. So at her age, there's plenty of time. She's got a big whiteboard in front of her that's empty. She can grab any Koki and she can draw on the board and decide how to build her career. Our job as human resource professionals, as training development people, and as line managers is to ask the question, how do we best develop people? How do we optimize South Africans and anybody in any country to do the work that they do? Now, I mentioned South Africans for a reason because we live in a country that's managed to break its education system. And so a lot of South Africans are starting from a very low base. As an example, I had an interesting discussion with a client recently, and they were looking for an intern. Very straightforward job, not a very high salary, but they were looking for an intern. A candidate arrived for the interview and they were asked where they live, and they gave a name of an area that nobody recognized. After the meeting, we looked it up on the map and we discovered that it was in a rural part of the Eastern Cape. We then discovered that this person had jumped on a bus to get to the interview and had come all the way to Joburg by bus from a rural part of the Eastern Cape, which is a mission. And then we discovered that she's got a BCom in finance and maths. And she got that from a university in the Eastern Cape. So I thought, wow, that's interesting. Coming from a very rural area with a very small rural school, and she's managed to get a BCom finance and maths and get all the way to Joburg to apply for an intern position. Now, that to me is a person on a path. That's a person on a mission. And our job as leaders and managers is really to help that person fly, because in South Africa, there are too many people who are left behind by the system. All right, so what do we do? What's the next question with our friend Chantal? So first of all, we need to reassess this person, and there's a technical reason for that, because some of the data that was reviewed, there were some issues with the assessments, and that led me to suggest to the client that we reassess this person before finalizing the conclusions. Second of all, strengthen the basic problem-solving habits. And this can be done in a number of different ways, whether it's filling in Sudoku puzzles, getting a Duolingo subscription and doing maths problems or chess problems, or learning a language, or whether it's going online and doing intelligence quizzes and problem-solving quizzes, or if it's going to university and getting a diploma, a certificate, or a degree. There are hundreds of ways to improve your basic problem-solving habits. Second of all, help her to understand how. Teach her problem definition and simplification. And there's a way you can coach people to do that on the systems we use. And coach her through questions rather than answers. If someone says to me, Steve, how do I drill a hole? And I grab a drill and I grab the wall and I drill a hole, I'm not actually helping that person. I need to rather turn around and say, well, what do you think we should do? So when a staff member comes at you with a question about something, your first answer should always be, what do you think? And that forces the person to think, well, I don't know, I was thinking this. And then if it's the wrong answer, you say, well, why did you think that was the right answer? So the what and the why are very interesting and useful questions to ask a staff member who's developing or growing. And this is at any level. I can be the chief executive and I can have my CFO coming to me to ask a question about the strategy. And I can say to my CFO, what do you think? And when the CFO says something strange, say, why do you think that? And sometimes the chief executive learns something amazing about how the business is thinking because the CFO picked up a stompy from the operations director in a conversation at the coffee machine. So it's often useful to understand the what and the why of how people think about things. The second last point here, create clearer accountability. We notice that this individual tends to give up too soon and that she often postpones the completion of tasks. So we said that this could be argued as an accountability performance management issue. So we said, let's rather make sure that this person is very clear about her job description and what she needs to deliver, and then make sure that the manager follows through with accountability discussions once a week, once a month as required. And then obviously the last step is logical, monitor if things are moving and changing. Sometimes we get two reactions from people when we monitor them. The first is a frustration because people don't like being monitored, and that leads to two paths. The one is they resign eventually. The second is that they grow and they say, get off my case, I'm doing the work. And that's what you want. You want them to be irritated because with a bit of luck, that irritation leads to change. Okay, and then finally, number 3. This is an older individual in her mid-40s. This is a person who's been in the company for about 10 years, and she has a long 25-year career in the world of administration in multiple industries and multiple kinds of administration. So she's got the most experience in our client sector, so that's good. So she knows what she's doing in that sector. But she's a person who gets stressed quite easily and doesn't like to be told about her career development and what she should be doing next, and being asked, for example, to be the replacement for the manager when the manager goes on leave. She hates that responsibility. She doesn't want to be promoted, even though she's been offered promotions in the past. Now, again, you may say, well, gosh, why is this person not wanting to be promoted? Maybe this is a bad person in my team, and I should actually get this person out of my team. The truth is absolutely not. The truth is you've got a person here whose assessment results suggest that she loves a stable work environment. She is calm, dependable, technically experienced. She's motivated by the stability of her team, and she's motivated by the competence that she brings to her job. She doesn't want to be a manager, and quite frankly, her assessment results suggested that that would be a bad move for her and a bad move for the company. So what did we do with this individual? We said retain and recognize. Now, recognition comes in two forms. I get recognized with non-monetary value. For example, I get sent on company conferences. I get sent in technical technical competency improvement seminars, webinars, conferences. I get a chance, maybe if I'm good enough and senior enough, to go on an international conference. So this individual is likely to love the opportunity to learn, to deepen her product and system knowledge, And so she becomes the company's trusted technical resource. Now, an example of this that you might all relate to is Bruce Whitfield. Now, I'm not suggesting that I understand Bruce at all or that I understand anything about the individual, but he's a useful example because Bruce cut his teeth on 702's Money Show in Johannesburg. For those of you who don't know 702, it's a radio channel in Johannesburg. And he was famous, or is still famous, for hosting the show on an evening show at about 6 o'clock every evening. And from that base, he's developed a reputation as an author, as an article writer, as an MC for conferences, as a guest speaker to conferences and audiences and companies. And he's built an extraordinary presence in the financial sector. Now, I'm not saying that this person should do the same thing, but this person could become the trusted technical resource and the person who guides either the colleagues or the company to become better at what they do and what she does. If she wants to, and this is her choice at the age of in mid-40s, it's her choice to decide that actually she could lecture at Gibbs or Wits or UJ, or she could write articles for a technical magazine, or she could present a paper at a conference. Now, that requires her to overcome a fear of public speaking, to overcome a fear of being seen in the limelight. Some people hate the limelight, and that's fine. If she chooses not to do that, that's completely her choice. However, there's a chance that she might get a kick out of being recognized for her particular niche, her particular talent of specialization in the company. And so she gets famous inside the company, and she can therefore start to increase her fame outside of the company without having to become a manager or a leader. She's by default a leader, technically speaking, but she's not a leader of people or a manager of people, which creates uncertainty that a lot of people don't like. So create opportunities for her to be the guide to other people, respect her preferred career path, and avoid forcing a management role. So those are the three people in the team. There's one manager that we spoke with who was very chuffed to get the feedback, and it endorsed her feelings about each of these people. And that's what I look for when we're consulting as a company is, are we endorsing the lived experience of the manager? In other words, our assessments, our knowledge, our experience in the marketplace, together with the manager's lived experience of the individual, does that resonate for the line manager and the HR manager? If it does, then we've won the game. Then we're getting somewhere on behalf of the company, and we're getting somewhere on behalf of the line manager, HR, training and development, and for the manager himself or herself. So in this particular case, to summarize, we want to stretch and focus Sabelo. He's a high potential employee. We want to provide support and structure for Chantel and as a developing employee. And then we want to retain and recognize Pramila, who is a steady contributor to the team. So good management does not mean treating everybody identically.